you, or we try to help you like you just a little bit more. This is Brian Krasman from the Daily News.
And I'm Randy Detour from the Tribune Review.
And I'm Jim DeBrizzo, star of Stage and Screen.
Was that you on Broadway I saw?
That was me. No.
I have the playbill still.
I was dancing.
Incredible.
Let's hope not.
It was a musical.
Well, we're back for yet another entertaining broadcast. Tom is on assignment this week. He will be with us again next week, we think.
He's training.
Yeah, he's surveying the arena for WrestleMania 18, so he'll be back.
On this week's episode, we're going to get into the events of this past week's Raw, which contained a WWF World Title change. We're going to get into some issues with some old WWF faces that may be returning soon to make a pretty big impact probably at the beginning of the year. And we're going to touch a little bit on the untimely death of world-class star Chris Adams, who never quite made it in the big time, but, you know, he tagged with Gina Hernandez and got hair solution squirted on his head and he went bald instantly, so that was kind of cool.
I forgot about that.
And he was a preliminary wrestler with WCW, doing worldwide proud, wrestling the likes of La Parca, I don't know. Pretty much any Mexican or anybody wearing a mask.
So we're going to get into that in just a few moments, so go and get a pizza or something like that and come on back. Getting ready for a nice long WWF title reign. It just all stopped. As I'm sure everybody at home who did see Raw this past week, Angle lost the WWF title back to Stone Cold Steve Austin in a move that I don't think was all that big a surprise. And maybe for some of the people who were saying that they were trying to exploit the war, that maybe some of that was quieted, because after the events of last weekend, it sure would have made sense to keep the belt on him if that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, like, I reviewed the show for the website, and I gave the show a C, and the only reason I gave it that was because I really thought that the WWF was going to give Kurt Angle a serious title run, maybe let him main event against someone like a Rob Van Dam or a Booker T at No Mercy, but instead, it can be debated whether or not the WWF, quote-unquote, got cold feet with Angle as champion. I don't think that was the case, but it's certainly something that we can bring up to take the title off him so soon.
Well, you also got to look back, and I think the intent always was for him to win in Pittsburgh. I don't think anything in the world changed that. They obviously stuck with the plan. You also got to look at, well, did they originally plan to take the title off of Kurt Angle this soon? I mean, we don't know, obviously. But I hate to think they did this move just to quiet a few critics who are wrong to begin with.
I don't think they did. And, there was some talk for a while that the WWF wasn't happy with the amount of response Kurt Angle was getting as champion. And I don't know. I also don't buy that as a reason why they took the belt off. And that's just generally not how they operate. They usually try to give guys a little bit more time. So apparently this probably was the plan all along. But Rennie, I agree with you. I mean, I would like to have seen Kurt Angle put the belt up against somebody else at a pay-per-view at the same time. Boy, there's a lot of white shirts shown there, isn't there? But at the same time, I would like, Steve Austin probably has the more logical matches ready to go for a world title defense. So, I mean, I can understand it as far as that goes.
That's a good point, because obviously there's a built-in feud with Rob Van Dam. You saw last night, the Alliance was chanting RVD as they walked by Stone Cold's locker room, and they made a point to make note of that. And, I guess from that perspective, I guess you can say that, okay, No Mercy might have Rob Van Dam versus Steve Austin. But again, where does that leave Kurt Angle?
Right.
And are they looking towards maybe having a Kurt Angle, Rob Van Dam, Steve Austin three-way, since Kurt Angle wrestled Rob Van Dam on SmackDown a few weeks ago?
I'm just going to put out
That's just something. But again, the point being that we don't want to see a three-way. Let's make definitive feuds, and let's keep a title on a guy long enough where he can establish himself as champ.
Well, taking that point of logic, it seems like they're trying to do something to get RVD up into the main event status, if your train of thought's true. Couldn't the same effect for the benefits of having RVD in that match be achieved with Kurt Angle as a champion? I mean,
you're saying if it was Kurt Angle and Rob Van Dam in a one-on-one match?
Yeah, or if it was Steve Austin and Rob Van Dam. I'm saying for the sake of the title change, I mean, I think you'll get the same effect for Rob Van Dam against Steve Austin or Kurt Angle.
Well, that's the thing. Rob Van Dam's always going to be the constant. You always know what you're going to get out of him, and I think that's the point that you're trying to come up with, is the fact that you know when you put Rob Van Dam out there, you're going to get X, Y, and Z from him. But Kurt Angle and Steve Austin are where you're going to see the difference.
But I think again, going back to your train of thought, if it's true that I think this is going to be more of a learning experience for RVD, see if he can perform, see if he draws, and go from after that maybe they pull him back into the hardcore division, which is, by the way, where he should be. What I'm saying is, either way, you put him against Austin or Angle, you're still gonna get the same offense out of RVD. I just don't see using that train of thought to put him against Austin. I don't think he needed to change the belt for RVD to be in this match to benefit.
Oh, I don't think so either. But you know what I think you're going to see out of the WWF, and it seems like they're leaning towards this way, is they're starting to have some tension in the alliance. I don't know if this means that sometime in the near future they're going to have their own show. We saw Booker T take offense with Rob Van Dam and him getting all the attention from the alliance. So you're starting to see a little bit of subtle, grumblings, I guess you can say, within the alliance as a group. And so that's probably why I think that they went ahead and they're going to book Steve Austin versus Rob Van Dam for the title.
Well, speaking of guys, I think that have something to prove, and excuse me if I don't get excited. I think we saw the beginning of Chris Jericho turning heel again whenever he got into a confrontation with The Rock after they lost a match to Shane McMahon and the previously mentioned Rob Van Dam. This conceivably and logically should be the chance that Chris Jericho's needed all along to prove his worth to the WWF, that he can be a top-level wrestler and he can be a main eventer. It would be as a heel, obviously. But, you know, I mean, we talked about this on this show, gosh, for, what, a year and a half now, and I'm just afraid that in a year and a half we're going to be talking about the same thing. You know, Chris Jericho's still not getting the chance he deserves. You know,
it's not a case of him getting the chance he deserves. I mean, you're putting him in there. You had him in there with Austin a couple months ago.
right.
He's in there against The Rock. I mean, granted, you can make a case maybe RVD's getting a better chance than he is overall, but he's got his chances. He's up against the top two
No,
guys.
I don't think
I'm
he
going to
has.
disagree with that point wholeheartedly, because I think what happens is he gets a chance and then WWF forgets to keep
They
going
do
with
that
him.
with everybody. That's,
Well,
that's a fault for the
then
whole
there's
company.
where your starting point with the
That's a
WWF
fault
where
for the
there's a
whole company.
problem.
But Chris Jericho's gotten his chances.
I don't think he's got
He's
a full chance.
He hasn't
It's
got a
like-
full chance.
It's
no.
like you give him the carrot and then you pull it back.
How did he perform in that three-way with Austin?
Right, that was one match though. But the thing is
One match?
Sure, that was one match that he looked particularly terrible. If you're talking about the King of the Ring three-way match,
Right.
that's true. And there's been other matches where he hasn't looked as good. But the thing is you can't deny the man's ability. You can't deny his popularity. And just like Rob Van Dam, he's the same type of wrestler. He's going to bust someone open, accidentally a couple times. He's going to screw up moves a couple times. Rob Van Dam does the same thing. But it's come to the point now where they have to give Chris Jericho a full-fledged shot to either succeed or fail. And you can't do that in one match, and you can't do that in 1 month.
Well, the thing, too, about Chris Jericho, and I've pointed this out many times on this show, and I think you guys have, too, you go back to his feud with Triple H. That was a chance for the WWF to take Chris Jericho and make him into a serious main eventer. And they did that through the whole summer with the shot of Jericho wearing the title and Hunter feuding with him. That's the kind of stuff that Jericho should be doing. And what happened was they did all that all summer, and then by fall, it was, well, let's have him feud with this guy, some mid-carder. And that's not offense to anybody like a Bob Holly, but, you can't go from Triple H to Hardcore Holly and expect the same reaction for Chris Jericho. It's not going to work.
Well, it's 1952 again, and we're black and white. So we're going to come back after this in live living color, and we're going to talk a little bit about two faces that used to be in the WWF that you may be seeing again very soon. Please come on back.
World-class wrestler, at least that's what he's known for anyway. Chris Adams was found murdered. There's believed that the suspect is his roommate. There's still a lot of sketchy details about the specifics of this, but I think we owe it, at least on this show, to talk a little about Chris Adams, who maybe wasn't so much as influential on camera as he was off.
Yeah, I mean, you had to really sort of grow up in the era that most of us grew up in. It was like, the mid to late 80s, when Chris Adams really was a force of world-class wrestling down in Texas, and even more in the early 80s a little bit. He was one of the two. He was a big-time heel down there. I mean, a big thorn in the side of the Von Erichs, who Jim, I think, worshipped.
Pretty much, yes. Pretty close.
But he was a legendary tag team with him and Gino Hernandez, who, by the way, died in like 1985 of a cocaine overdose. But, really, I think a lot of the modern fans probably can't understand what was good about Chris Adams. Because actually, his run in WCW, like you mentioned earlier, wasn't so good. And even some of the stuff in the 90s wasn't so great. But he had some good moments.
Yeah, but probably really underrated Adams Hernandez team. I always, looking back, I always wonder why those guys never moved on. Obviously, Gino Hernandez's death probably had something to do with it, but
Yeah.
people hate. I mean, in Texas, people hated Chris Adams. Obviously, feuding against the Von Erichs. I mean, a good heel makes a good face, and Chris Adams filled that role.
Absolutely, and we mentioned, I joked earlier about the hair solution, but that's eventually Gino Hernandez and Chris Adams feuded. They were going to do a hair versus hair feud. And Gino Hernandez had this solution that he told everybody if he squirted it on Chris Adams' head, his hair would just fall out. He ended up squirting him in the eyes, and they did this angle for like 3-4 months where Chris Adams was blind, and they actually never got to finish the angle because in that time is when Gene Hernandez actually passed away. But again, it's a shame that we lose another face in the wrestling world, albeit one that has been kind of quiet for a while. But
yeah, I mean, and I think that goes back again to his brief stint. Actually, it might have not been that brief because he worked a lot of like worldwide shows and things like that with WCW, where I think some of the newer fans probably just saw him as some old guy that tried to rekindle what was left of his past, because we all know that WCW doesn't make it a point to hype up anybody or talk about anything he used to do. So
yeah.
I think that's one of the things that really hurt him. But the other thing about Chris Adams, and I think this is what will be known for, thanks to the popularity of Steve Austin, is the fact that he trained him.
Right. That's that point cannot be overstated. And they had a great feud in Texas for a while. And yeah, that's true. And it's his biggest protege ever is the biggest star in the wrestling world right now. And I don't think that's a small point at all. So there you go. That's something for the kids at home.
Actually, I've seen some of their matches. I think in one, Steve Austin was in full football gear.
Football gear, yeah.
Or maybe actually top. Maybe he didn't have the pads on his legs.
Yeah, because I think Chris Adams had a kendo stick, and that's how he was trying to avoid being hit with a kendo stick. It's because he had the shoulder pads.
That was the Ninja Chris Adams era. Probably not the best way to package him when that goes. They were building up the whole super kick that he had.
Yeah.
I don't correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's probably one of the first to actually use that particular move.
Yeah, one of.
Well, you have a good argument with a Stan Lane fan, but
Oh, true.
we'll have to.
Well, I think he used it in '88 when he came to WCW. Maybe I'm probably off in my years there, but either way.
We don't research anything.
We don't have researchers. We paid for key grips.
We have, what are they? I forget what they're called. Fact checkers or runners or however Tom referred to them last week.
Yeah.
The same people who sit in the Monday Night Football booth and feed stats to Al Michaels and those other guys.
We have Mr. Dickinson, but considering we're in a period of tolerance in this country, we won't say how we really feel about him. But nonetheless, Chris Adams, I think he was 46. I believe that was the age. And the fellow he was rooming with was arrested and then charged with the murder. So again,
he's actually claiming self-defense, I believe.
Yeah.
The early reports are saying that.
Another sad case of another talent lost, and again, another talent that really kind of was underappreciated. So we're going to come back, and this time we really are going to talk about two faces you probably will be seeing again soon on WWF television. So come on back.
4, 3.
Welcome back to Pro Wrestling Review. We thank you for joining us. And as we mentioned, the WWF is either talking or going to talk or hoping to talk.
They have talked.
They have talked, and hopefully they'll continue to talk.
We all talked.
Well, they called us and asked our opinion.
Oh, just spit it out, Jim. Charlie and Russ Haas, here they come.
That developmental duel really worked out for him,
Yeah.
huh?
Actually, the one had a heart attack. I shouldn't have said that.
Ooh.
Hopefully he gets better.
But the two names we teased all show is Scott Hall and Kevin Nash.
Oh,
Yeah.
you dropped
Sorry.
the bomb on us, Jim.
Now, I scoop. So what do you think?
It's
Well.
okay. Well, thanks for joining us. No, I don't know. There's good and bad to this. I actually did my column this past week on this topic, and there's good and bad. I mean, again, it's two very big names. They're both main eventers. They're both heavy. There's good and bad. I mean, again, it's two very big names. They're both main eventers. They're both heavy hitters. But both have major drawbacks, Kevin Nash being his work ethic related problems and Scott Hall personal problems.
Yeah, but I mean, we should be, and that's a good point, but we should be quick to point out that from at least what Jim Ross said on his Ross report, Scott Hall's done a lot to clean himself up, and I know we've talked about that in the past before, about how Scott Hall's got his life back in order, he's ready to roll, and he went with ECW a few years ago, and that of course didn't work out, so it's a tough thing because the WWF's really in a tough spot right now because this invasion angle is pretty much non-existent.
Yeah.
I think in hindsight, they probably should have waited a little bit longer before they brought this WCW entity into the WWF, only because they didn't have any guys. So, you look at these guys, and like you said, there's two good points. One, they're really two really big names that are identifiable with WCW. But then you look at the other point, the guys don't have a really good track record.
Yeah, and the problem too is just stemming with Nash, and a lot of people say, well, he has a lot of good creative ideas. He tries to kind of contribute a lot to the product, and that's great. But the problem is you're gonna, well, maybe you will, maybe you won't run into that situation where a guy like a Chris Jericho or a Lance Storm, who aren't that big and who guys like Kevin Nash kind of look at as not really being credible professional wrestlers, is this a situation where they're not allowed to develop and they're not allowed to grow because, Kevin Nash has too much say? That's what I worry about.
Well, I think you'll see if that develops is when WCW does get its show, whenever that happens. But I think Hall and Nash included in this angle it's something that they definitely need to put on their own WCW show, separate promotion. We've talked about it before. Whether or not if they keep it separate at that point, whether or not Hall and Nash become a deterrent, I think they will personally. But I mean, you're just gonna have to wait and see. I mean,
to address what Brian said though about people like Lance Storm and Chris Jericho, I don't think, and I hope I'm not wrong, but I don't think that they're gonna have their hands in the booking as much as we might think they would. And here's why: because you look at what Kevin Nash did with WCW as a booker. He basically ran the company into the toilet. So you can look at that, but you can also look at WCW as a whole company and say, well, there really wasn't anybody running the company anyway. So Nash probably took it upon himself to say, I'll do it, and he sucked. And that's fine, but there's no way, at least now, that Nash is going to be able to overtake Vince McMahon, or even to a smaller degree, Triple H's influence on the WWF, because he is coming back as well.
Yeah, I think even something that should be pointed out, when you look at all sides of this thing is, you worry about Nash and Hall and their influence on the creative side of things, but I think maybe you do have to kind of look at a positive here and say, when Shawn Michaels, there's Triple H right there, when Shawn Michaels came back to the WWF right before WrestleMania, at least when he was supposed to, he had some behavioral problems, that was a report, and Triple H did not stand up for him and did not try to go to bat for him, knowing that that was going to be something that would be bad for the company. And hopefully it's going to be the same thing here. If Hall and Nash do try to pull some antics, hopefully somebody like Triple H, who is respected as a leader and who is looked up to in the locker room, can say, hey guys, this isn't how we run the company here anymore. I mean, this is a different show.
Well, I hope that's the case, but you also got to remember, it's now 4. I'm throwing X-Pac in there because he's always been a part of the clique anyway. Sure. But it's now 4. And what's going to happen when, I'm just going to throw a name here, Lance Storm, when the TV shows are separate, and it is a separate promotion, even though it's still one locker room, what's going to happen when Lance Storm gets a world title shot and Kevin Nash has to job to somebody?
Well, he's going to have to, Jim, because
I agree.
He's not in a situation like Goldberg is, where Goldberg can sit out for 3 years and keep collecting his money. Nash's contract is up. He's either going to... They will send him home.
I agree 100%.
I don't think the WWF would hesitate to send Nash home.
I'm sorry?
I don't think the WWF would hesitate in 1 second to send Kevin Nash home.
I hope so.
I don't think
But what's going to happen when Nash
trouble.
says, I'm not jobbing, Scott Hall, Triple H, X-Pac, and all they say, hey, he's not doing this, and we're not doing what you want.
First point, Triple H wouldn't do that.
I would hope.
I think Triple H is smart enough. I think he's proven it in the past with Brian's point about Shawn Michaels that Hunter's not going to take Kevin Nash's side. Hunter has too much to lose, quite frankly.
Yeah,
you have to look at it from the situation that, or the perspective that Kevin Nash is 40 years old, Triple H is 30 or 31 or whatever it is, but he still has years left in wrestling. He's not going to ruin it by siding with somebody who's only in it for his reasons.
Yeah.
That's not what I do not think Triple H is going to do that. I think that's just a stupid
I agree with
thing.
you theoretically, but this is a business where stupid things happen. I mean, you never know.
Hunter's not that stupid.
I hope you're right.
Well, you know what, before we go to the break here, we'll just say that, I think we can all agree that Kevin Nash and Scott Hall signing would be huge and would drive people to the television shows, but I think it would be the after effects. But actually, we're going to come back next segment and do something a little bit different, because with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash possibly coming back, we have, of course, the possibility of the New World Order. So we're going to do a little bit of a counterpoint next segment of whether or not bringing the NWO back would be a good idea or not. So come on back.
Geez, that was fast, Jim. I'm not really ready for that. But
I'm sorry, let me talk some more.
In that case, no, I'm just kidding. First question, where did, as it was put, Big Chris go to school? It was at Harvard. Question number 2, who temporarily left the show to visit their sick mother? It was Maven. Question number 3, and this is an opinion question, and we wanted an essay, but nobody did it. Who was hotter, Nydia or Taylor? We accepted Taylor as the answer, even though one person had a really long essay about why Nydia was better, and it, deserves reading, but not on the air.
We actually asked who was hotter.
Yeah. If you come to the meetings, Jim, never mind. The question from last week's show, who were the original members of D-Generation X? Shawn Michaels, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Chyna, and Ravishing Rick Rude. This week's winner is Eric Houston. Do you want to say something now?
I don't think I can.
Well, Eric, for getting all these questions, well, for getting 3 of them right, and I don't know. Anyway, you get a coupon for a free large pizza from Original Pizza Works, an order of chicken wings, and a 2-liter bottle of carbonated beverage. You can redeem that at their store in Dravosburg, Pennsylvania, that is located in the United States of America. And what's the question for the week? The new question.
This
for
week's
week?
question
Why don't you
is,
ask Giggles down there? He
Yeah.
probably
Hey,
knows.
we asked who was hotter. I just can't believe it.
All right, yeah, read the question.
I don't come up with this stuff, Jim.
Wow, you wrote it down and everything.
Just read
Who,
it. Damn.
who did the Outsiders defeat for their first WCW Tag Team title reign? That's once again, who did the Outsiders defeat for their first WCW Tag Team title reign? Go on ProWrestlingReview.com, click on trivia. Hey, you can see it right there. The magic of television.
And as magical as this segment's been,
I'll see you later.
we're going to be back.
Rennie and Jim, yeah, I can't even get names right. Rennie and Jim are going to discuss right now the possible formation of the New World Order in the WWF confines. So, gentlemen, why don't you take it away and don't hit each other.
Oh, thank you, Brian.
Clash of the Titans.
Right, that's equally bad movie. I mean, I suppose it's natural to think, well, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash coming back, NWO, I mean, that's what they're most famous for, not to disregard their WWF days before that. I don't think it's a particularly good idea for a myriad of reasons. Number one is, I think NWO, WCW, ECW, it's an argument of semantics. NWO would be an invasion angle, but aren't you already doing an invasion angle?
Well, I think that you can make a case that the Alliance was supposed to be the big invasion, but I don't think you can invade with 15 guys or 20 guys in an Alliance. And the other thing I think Hall and Nash, and if they decide to put your buddy X-Pac in there, well, yeah, of course, because he's such a scintillating ball of fire when he wants to be. I just think that's what they're known for. They're known for being that group that invades. I think it wouldn't hurt for them to wear the NWO T-shirts and make them seem like that. Like I said, because I think they can fall back, because they're going to have to. They're going to fall back on the NWO gimmick because Hall, maybe not so much Hall, but Nash can't keep it up in the ring. And it's just something for people to identify them with, because I think they're just too strong of personalities to be put in with just the Alliance and just to be members of them.
Well, I think they are going to be put into an Alliance. I mean, we can obviously agree on that. Obviously, to help the Alliance angle. Just calling them the NWO, it's not going to, I don't think it's going to work because, number one, it failed like 3 times after its initial push. And number two, they're not just going to put Hall and Nash into the Alliance. They are going to be the leaders of the Alliance, disregarding what Steve Austin's going to do, obviously. But I just don't think, I think it hurts WCW and ECW. And don't forget, the goal is still have a separate promotion with all this. And if that's the goal, if you start calling this whole thing the NWO, nobody really bought it as a separate organization to begin with. And if you call it the NWO, who's going to buy it when they go onto their own show and call it their own, or they're just going to go back to WCW at that point? I just...
Well, no, I think a couple points that you made. One, I think the NWO failed only because they didn't keep the number in the group down to a small size. I think you have Hall, I think you have Nash, I think you have X-Pac. I think you maybe bring one more other guy in. People have been throwing around the name Albert. I don't know why. Maybe because his head's large, but... Well, the thing of it is, you got to keep the numbers in the NWO small for it to succeed. And the other thing, you can never discount the fact that the NWO could be somewhat of a floater promotion in the sense that they can wreak havoc with WCW, ECW, and with the WWF. They don't really have a home. That's something a little different.
Okay, now, if you take that perspective and they are separate, the NWO is separate, I just don't think that'll work either because, again, they're very limited wrestlers. And I'm sorry, Scott Hall right now is very limited. And it's the same thing. Is the NWO going to invade everybody with 4 people? How's that going to work? I just don't think that'll work.
How did the 4 Horsemen beat up everybody with only 4
But
people?
in that case, you can't do an invasion angle with it. You can do the invasion story as far as WCW and ECW goes.
Right.
But if you put Hall and Nash into the Alliance, that's fine. If you want to make them like the Horsemen, that's fine. Don't call them the NWO. Call them the Wolfpack, maybe.
Well, then you're starting to get in just a little bit of different wording because the Wolfpack was just a variation of the NWO when they wore red instead of white.
But that wasn't the original. Okay, you're right there. But that wasn't the original intent. The original intent, from what Kevin Nash has always said, was the Wolfpack. He just wanted the close-knit center group in the NWO.
We know by now we don't listen to Kevin Nash.
That's true.
When he says something, you just kind of go,
true.
"Okay, Kev, we got it."
That's the thing. If you put NWO on a small group, and if it is a floater group, like you say, people are thinking NWO invasion, takeover. I don't think you want to go that direction if you keep it a small group. If you put Hall and Nash with the Alliance, you call them the Wolfpack, give him some NWO-like tendencies. You can do that, and maybe just keep the Wolfpack, Hall, Nash, and X-Pac, and believe me, it sickens me to say that. But then you bring like maybe 2 or 3 of the Alliance members in with them. Maybe you get the right chemistry between that group.
Yeah.
Then maybe you can do like a Horseman thing with them. But
Well,
you can't call it the NWO.
My contention is, though, that I think that Hall, Nash, X-Pac, maybe not so much the X-Pac, but I think I call him the X-Pac, but anyway, I don't think Hall, Nash, and X-Pac are going to fit in well with the Alliance, because I think there's a lot of guys there that they need to build on with someone like a Lance Storm, like a Rhino, even like maybe a Chuck Palumbo. They need to start giving these guys a little more character development, and I think if you put Hall and Nash and X-Pac in with the Alliance, they're just going to squash their personalities completely. So I think if they're their own group, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you about the whole invasion thing, but I think when you say invasion, I think Hall, Nash, and the NWO need to just be a group that does what they want to do and don't necessarily have to invade, so to speak.
Then you're getting into 4 groups, almost.
Well, it'd
like
be 3.
3 groups. But that's the thing.
Like 2.5.
You tried it with ECW, and we're running short on this debate here. But that's what you should have did with ECW in the first place. As far as, I mean, we're getting very backtracked. I mean, I don't think, the thing is, if you want to keep Hall and Nash and that group separate from everybody, I just don't think you can call it the NWO, because people have misconceptions about it. And it's just another word for an invasion angle that isn't working.
Well, I can't disagree with about the CW point you made. So we're going to come back, and Brian's going to be back with us, and we're going to talk more wrestling. So come back.
Sorry.
How come I don't get to use the computer too?
I don't know how it gets here, man. This first one is actually a post on our website from CBR, New Alexandra PA. He actually says something I agree with and something that I'm probably going to laugh before I get through. The WWF needs to bring back Vince Russo and Ned Ferrara. I can't read anymore.
He's broken down in the air, ladies and gentlemen.
To head up, they need to bring back Russo and Ferrara to head up the creative team and get rid of the sitcom reject writing staff they have now. The WWF needs to repair problems within before attempting to promote WCW as a separate brand. Now, that last part I agree with. They do need to repair internally. They can't, obviously, they're not promoting WCW as a separate brand, and, well, it just isn't going well all across the board, really.
Yeah, that's true.
It's an interesting point, though, about Vince Russo and Ned Ferrara, who I don't... See, this is a tough one, because you look at Vince Russo and what he did in WCW, and you think, oh, my goodness, he just started the ball rolling in the wrong direction. But then you can look and say, well, there's backstage politics. People didn't want him to do certain things. And when he was in the WWF, he actually... Sometimes the storylines had some semblance of order, but he also had Vince McMahon to take his ideas and channel them in the right direction, which is something he didn't have in WCW, and you saw that with things like Tank Abbott versus Big Al in a knife-wielding match. I mean, stuff like that, it just makes you wonder how Vince Russo even got a job on the WWF magazine staff. So it's a 50-50 point, really.
The one point he does have here is you need to have wrestling writers getting more involved. I don't know who's in charge now, but like I said, the whole story in TV lately just isn't working.
Well, let's keep this in mind, the whole thing about Russo and Ferrara. Who's to say that they want to come back? I don't think they would. Vince Russo had expressed in the past wanting to spend more time at home, and I think over the last month you've seen more people kind of trying to get a little bit more family-oriented. That's just been sort of the way this country's gone. And I think that, especially now, I don't think you're going to be able to bring Vince Russo back to television. I don't think this is going to be, not to television, but to the WWF. I just don't think this is going to be a task he's going to want. He's done it before. He doesn't have anything more to prove in this area. I just, why do it? But I agree with him that the writing staff right now definitely needs to be shaken up a little bit. The consistency has just been terrible, as we said the last couple of weeks. You see guys getting pushes for a while, then you don't. Then you see, like, the U.S. title was being defended week after week by Rhino, and all of a sudden it's like vanished into thin air, and the light heavyweight title's back. I mean, we really need some consistency from these people.
Actually, another post.
Russo and Ferrara.
Another post says bring back Russo and Ferrara. So I don't know what to make of that, but
I think it's just a tendency of fans to start looking around and saying, well, you know what? When they were around, things were different. Things weren't necessarily good. They were different.
They were a piece of the puzzle. I mean, as WCW proved, they weren't the whole puzzle, though.
Right.
So they're not going to come back, though. We should move on. Go ahead, read something, guys.
Okay, this is an interesting letter, and probably one we should have read about 3 weeks ago. But anyway, it was good to see Chronic finally arrive. I couldn't figure out what was doing with their absence. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. I'll admit I don't keep up like I used to, but I'm seriously questioning the quality of the WWF in the wake of the continued absence of Goldberg, the Steiners, and Sting. Okay, well, let's start on the first point. Chronic sucks. And if you want to know why, watch the match from Unforgiven.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have any bullet points. They suck. End of story. The other thing, Goldberg's under contract, we've said many times. Scott Steiner is somebody that they've obviously been interested in since the beginning of this invasion, but he has, I believe, a foot injury that is relatively serious from what I've been told, so he won't be back probably until the beginning of the year. As far as the other Steiner brother is concerned, he can park cars for all I care. And Sting, again, no interest really in coming back. Why walk away from a big deal with Time Warner? So
I think he's expressed interest in retirement at one point.
yeah, that's the
I can't
point.
blame him or Goldberg, quite honestly.
No, free money. What the hell?
I got an interesting one here. This is from one of our loyal viewers each week, Jason. Jason's 15. And right before the whole thing happened with us and Bubba and us bringing in Golden Boy Dennis Gregory to defend our honor.
He's the helping hand now.
He's the helping hand. Is he a helping hand again?
I don't know what he is, but he's probably
He's Dennis Gregory. It really doesn't matter. He's
wrestler.
He's a great wrestler. But anyway, Jason decided he was going to step up to the plate and offer his services. And he said, I could use the 15-year-old thing as an underdog bump taker gimmick and overcome the odds, and he could put me over, I guess. Keep dreaming, Jason. I am somewhat trained, and this could mean a lot to me and my guys if I could be of help to you. And, please write back. Thank you for your time. God bless America. Jason, I appreciate it. Seriously, we all do. We're touched and honored that you would want to put yourself on the line to defend Pro Wrestling Review. I'm 27 years old, and I'm not going to get in the ring to defend Pro Wrestling Review. That's why we had Dennis Gregory do it for us. But, hey, you never know. Maybe a couple years down the road. Get yourself some real training, though. Get into training.
This is the second time he's wrote a letter to us
Yeah,
about
he had
getting
the
in
pool
wrestling.
wrestling idea, which
Yeah.
we, of course. And again, Jason, we admire your zeal, but please don't be stupid. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't want to get into the ring untrained.
Wait till you're 18 and get trained.
Don't get hurt. Yeah, go to somebody, go to a true professional if you really want to do this, and then we'll talk.
Then
Until
maybe
then.
in 3 years you can defend
Yeah.
the Pro Wrestling Review staff.
3 years from now, I'll be retired, so it really doesn't matter. Well, I guess that's it for the letter segment. It seems that our time has run out. That's the indication I get from the control center here. So we're going to come back. We're going to do our rants, which is going to include the return of a name I swore would never be uttered on the air here again, but I lied, so we'll be right back. Wrestling Review, it's time for the rant. So since I'm sitting on this end of the table, I'm going to start. And I promised I wasn't going to mention Phil Mushnick ever again on this show. But man, if anybody has this TV guide from this past week, the one that has Survivor on the cover, he does this little Mushnick rant in his little meaningless column, which is now in the black and white section. That's how important it is. But anyway, he took the WWF to task for running a show September 13th in Houston, Texas, 2 days after the terrorist attacks here in our country. And we mentioned on this show that we kind of debated whether or not they should go through with the show. And I think what we said was there's really no right or wrong answer. I think what kind of us, we preferred they wouldn't do it, but we sort of understood that they did. Well, Mushnick took him to task and said it's just like the Owen Hart thing. Owen Hart died the next day they did a show. And, it shows you how insensitive the WWF is. 2 days after the terrorist tragedies, Vince McMahon exploits it and packs people in an arena, which is, a safety measure. Phil, it's obvious you don't check your facts. I think we've confirmed that. But the political officials of Houston, Texas asked the WWF as a favor to do that show that night, to get people together into a crowd and show them it was okay to go out again. It was something that was supposed to bring the city together, and the WWF did it. And he said, well, Vince McMahon couldn't lose his precious dollars with the tickets that were already sold. I guess you also didn't do the research that the WWF offered full refunds for anybody who didn't want to come to the show. So that money was there if people wanted their money back, if they didn't feel safe enough to sit in that arena. So once again, Phil Mushnick decides he's got a torch to burn, and it's really a shame that in one of the darkest times of our country's history, and in a time when people are trying to come together, that once again Phil Mushnick would take in a tragedy that he can exploit for his own good.
Well said. I'm going to talk about Chris Jericho a little bit, and this past Monday on Raw that he may be turning. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. It's one of those things you have to play out. But I think the best idea to come out of all this, whether he stays a face or turns heel full-fledged, or they try to turn him heel and it's just not working because the fans love him. The simple fact is he's got to get an extended feud with The Rock. And yeah, we debated earlier. He has had some chances. Sometimes Jericho hasn't come through. Sometimes the WWF hasn't come through. But he's got to get an extended feud with The Rock. Number one, The Rock has nobody to fight with right now. And number two, you got to see once and for all if Chris Jericho can do it. And I don't want to get into another debate whether he can or he can't. I think in the long term he will. But it's just one of those things. You put money and time and a lot of investment in Chris Jericho. The fan support's there. It's not going anywhere. You got to see with The Rock. If you feud 2 months with The Rock and Chris Jericho performs amazingly, then I think the question's answered. But the question has to be answered. Let this feud go a while. See what Jericho can really do, and one way or another, you're going to find out the answer.
You love
that's basically
Jericho.
I am a fan of Jericho.
You don't have to lie. We'll talk about it off camera. We saw this past week on Raw the sizzling heel turn by William Regal, the WWF commissioner. And one of the things that Jim Ross pointed out was that how will the WWF now go on with their commissioner working for the Alliance? Well, 2 points I want to bring up. That's all well and good, but it seems to me like William Regal was turned just for the sake of turning someone, just for the sake of doing something. And I don't think there's anything wrong with him joining the Alliance, but you have to take him joining and build from that, because a lot of the times the WWF will do something big like this and they won't follow through with it. See, when ECW joined WCW a few months back, that was one of the biggest angles in wrestling, and what happened to it? Nothing, because the WWF just simply forgot about it. And the second point I want to bring up, if William Regal joined the Alliance just so Mick Foley can waddle his way back into the WWF to plug his Halloween hijinks book, which Tom and I have both read, as you saw on the show, this is another one of those things where why can't you get someone from the WWF from the WWF, have them step up, have them start a feud with William Regal. There's a built-in storyline there. Why do we need a non-wrestler to come back again and feud with William Regal, who is fully capable of wrestling? I just don't understand the logic in wanting to bring back someone like a Mick Foley, or even to a certain extent Vince McMahon. Granted, McMahon, when he does come back, will have a big impact on the WWF, but the impact would be there more if it was a wrestler, not a non-wrestler.
Never mind.
I think well said, I think.
Plug your columns.
All right. My column's called Sharpshooter. You can read it in the Daily News. That's on newsstands everywhere, or you can check it out on the internet, www.dailynewsmckeesborough.com. Check out the columnist section, and you'll find me.
If you want to read my column, you can pick it up on newsstands tomorrow, or if we're airing on Sunday morning today, you can read it on the web. It's www.triblive.com/sports. Don't shake your head.
I just don't recall us airing on Sunday morning.
We got a letter I read just now.
So. Or if they bump us to Tuesday nights, then too late.
We'll be live.
46 3/4 hours.
ProWrestlingReview.com. Click on trivia. You know the drill. This week's question again is: who did the Outsiders defeat for the first WCW Tag Team title reigns? Answer the other three on the website. Mail it to ProWrestlingReview@lycos.com. We got some great letters this week, and I hopefully will continue to do a letters segment every week.
That'd be all right.
Yeah. We're taking actually info off the message boards now, so please post on there as well.
Well, I think I'll do what Tom can never do, at least right away, and I'll wrap us up.
Man.
No offense to Tom. He and I have been friends for weeks.
And he will be back next week, unless
exactly. He'll be back to take me to task, as you say, yes. Brian, for what I just said. But for Brian, for Jim, this is Rennie from the Pro Wrestling Review saying we'll see you next week.